Aloha, welcome to the 41st Annual Hawaii International Film Festival presented by Holly Kalani and our discussion with Kayla Janisse, Director of Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched. We would like to extend our thanks to the BEWITCHED Foundation for sponsoring this program, the New American Perspective section. My name is Anderson Lay and I am the Artistic Director for the festival. Before we start the Q&A, I'd like to give a some quick housekeeping bits. First of all, I'd like to give a land acknowledgement, acknowledging Hawaii as an indigenous space whose original people are today identified as Kanaka Maoli or Native Hawaiians. For some quick housekeeping bits, for programming updates, go to our for up-to-date information on additions to our program and full schedule of films, events, HIF Q&As, and talk story sessions. Visit our website at HIFF41. For audience awards, to participate in our Hawaii News Now Audience Award voting, please cast your vote via ballot in theaters or online at watch.hiff.org or on our apps by voting with the 5 stars on a film's page. Vote for your favorite narrative, documentary, and short films. Mahalo to Hawaii News Now for their support. And before we bring in Kayla to the Q&A, I'd like to introduce Liz Boylan from the BEWITCHED Foundation. Liz?
Hi, Anderson. Thank you so much. On behalf of the BEWITCHED Foundation, we're really thrilled to be presenting New American Perspectives as part of HIFF41 this year. The New American Perspectives program shines a spotlight on foreign-born filmmakers and celebrating the contributions of immigrant artists to contemporary cinema and media in the United States. The program centers voices of immigrant artists through film screenings, filmmaker Q&As like this one, and programs at the Hawaii International Film Festival. Since 2007, we've been really proud to be able to present this program with our partners at HIFF in supporting and uplifting artists from diverse backgrounds. The BEWITCHED Foundation was established in 2000 by Jan and Maritza Wilczek, both immigrants from the former Czechoslovakia, with the mission of honoring and celebrating the contributions immigrants make to the arts, culture, and society. And we're thrilled to be working with Kayla Janisse this year and to be sharing her documentary, Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched, as part of our New American Perspectives program. And I turn it over to you, Anderson, and to Kayla for this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. And I'd like to introduce Kayla Janisse, from the director of Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched. How are you, Kayla?
I'm good. How are you?
I know you're on a world tour. You're literally touring the world with your film. I mean, you're basically calling in from Spain, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you're coming in fine and clear, and so we're very excited to have you as a Q&A with part of this Q&A. And we're very excited to have. I'm personally excited to have this film as part of the film festival, and shows the NAP section is has a very specific criteria, but at the same time, it's a very broad scope. And in that, it's exciting to have all these different diverse voices and films that are part of this section. So we're very honored to have your film as part of this year's film festival. First of all, I mean, I've known your work for almost 15 years. I mean, probably longer, Kayla. Like, I've known you as a film scholar, a historian, a film programmer. I first knew of you back when you were programming in the early days of Alamo Draft House, right? And also you and then also the founding of the Miskatonic Institute of Horror Studies. I mean, we will touch upon that soon, but first for this film, I mean, this is like this. I mean, it's like I would say it's like a syllabus and a seance in a way. I read somewhere it's like a syllabus and a seance. Like that's a perfect description of this film.
Wow.
Tell me, like, I mean, I know because of your work in just as a historian and whatnot. And this is, again, surprisingly, this is your first feature as a director, right?
Yeah.
Talk about kind of the idea of what was the inception behind making this film, and also kind of like, and and then touching upon the unholy trinity of Witchfinders General, Blood on Satan's Claw, and with the Wicker Man is kind of like the seed, the foundation for this documentary, where it goes from there.
Well, I think so. How it first started that I ended up making the film at all was that I work for Severin Films as my day job, and we do sort of mostly reissues of classic cult and genre films, you know. So occasionally we'll do an original production, but I would say most of our work is based on restoring and reissuing older genre films. And we were going to be releasing a Blu-ray, a limited edition Blu-ray of Blood on Satan's Claw. And, you know, there had just been a new British release of it. So they had just done a whole bunch of new extras for that release. And we were going to be getting all of those releases for our disc. And so my boss, David Gregory at Severin, was not initially planning on making any new extras for our disc. And I said, well, you know, don't you want to make at least one thing that's just ours? Like, what about, you know, why don't we just make a little featurette about folk horror, you know? And he was like, well, what about it? I was like, I don't know, just like connecting the film to, you know, the Unholy Trinity and how it's like the, you know, like the context of the 1970s and various folk horror films that were coming up in that time and how it relates to like cultural issues or anxieties from that time. You know, and the Unholy Trinity is, you know, as you said, it's like Wicker Man, Witchfinder General, Blood on Satan's Claw, and they were called the Unholy Trinity by Jonathan Rigby and Mark Gatiss in a 2010 BBC 4 TV special called The History of Horror, which was like a multi-part series, but it had an episode all about British horror, and that was where they kind of talked about this. And it was not the first time that Jonathan Rigby had used the term folk horror. He'd used it in one of his publications previously, and you know, it is a term that existed before, but it was really after that TV special in 2010 that the term became much more popularized. You know, like people started to use it much more commonly, and to try to sort of study it and define what it was. And so Blood on Satan's Claw was one of these like foundational films as part of that series. But for me personally, like The Wicker Man was the big folk horror film from my teenage years that I, you know, that had special meaning for me. I went and visited film locations, you know, from it in Scotland, and I was like kind of obsessed with Summerisle, and I thought it was a real island and that these people really lived there. Stuff, you know. So I was very impressionable, I guess, as a teenager. Yeah. I thought all kinds of things were real that weren't real before the internet. And so I was really interested in folk horror because of things like The Wicker Man, and because of things like even like TV stuff like The Dark Secret of Harvest Home or Children of the Corn, you know, stuff like that. Although we wouldn't have, you know, before all these discussions started in the last decade, people wouldn't have necessarily considered Harvest Home and Children of the Corn, you know, like they weren't necessarily automatically part of the same discussion with movies like The Wicker Man, even though when you think about it, you're like, clearly they're related. Clearly they have things in common, you know, and they're part of a similar genre. But back then it was like, they were seen as just as very different types of films, you know. But, you know, so personally, my interest began with The Wicker Man, I would say. But proposing to Severin to make this film was really I was just proposing a short featurette, and I wasn't even proposing for myself to make it. I was just saying like somebody at Severin should make this to go on the disc, because I was just an editor at Severin at the time. So I had not produced any extras, I hadn't directed anything. I was literally just taking assignments and working with a director and, you know, just fixing stuff according to their notes, you know. So I didn't have like direct input or anything. And so proposing this thing was the first time at Severin that I actually had input in something that we were doing as an extra. And not only that, but my boss, David Gregory, basically put me in charge of it. He was like, okay, well, you go off and do this. And I didn't know how to do it, but he was convinced that because of the Miskatonic Institute of Horror Studies, where I had essentially been booking teachers, booking experts for like a decade, you know, and, you know, he's like, it's a really similar process, you know, like booking, trying to find who are the experts that you want to talk to, arranging for them to speak and be recorded. You know, it's not that much different from what you're already doing with the Miskatonic Institute. It's very similar. So I just sort of started from there, you know, like, and I approached it the same way. And so that's how it started. And it just grew and grew and grew. You know, it was supposed to be half an hour long, and it just kept expanding, especially because every time we spoke to somebody, they would inevitably bring up stuff I hadn't thought of, you know. Right. That would kind of blow it open a bit more.
Right. I mean, what's great about this film, and it's very yes, it's, I mean, the running time is 3 hours and almost 3.5 hours almost, but it's so, I mean, it's not a listicle, it's not like a, behind the music or behind the, kind of like a, just like a straightforward kind of, I mean, you work in Severin Films with, essentially making supplemental material for your kind of, for Blu-rays and whatnot. It's not that, it's like, it's a mega text, in a way. And, at the same time, it's like, yeah, I'm jotting down films, like put in my Letterboxd account and whatnot. Like, it's like, wow, this is like, because like 100, I mean, over 100 films and interviews and whatnot. But can you talk about basically how, I mean, in a way, because of your work with the Miskatonic Institute and also just as a historian and scholar, I mean, this is kind of like a convergence of everything you've done. This is your, in a way, your life's work. So how did you craft it? Because I love the way you formatted, kind of by themes. I mean, essentially there's three main parts and whatnot. And I mean, for example, making it something that's like, something like you did like a theme on psychogeography, I believe, and then like, because there's so much to cover. I mean, in a way, this film is like, it's definitely a definitive piece, but at the same time, you only scratch the surface when it comes to folk horror around the world. So
Yeah.
what are the tough decisions you had to make?
Yeah, I mean, like, so originally when I did the rough cut myself. So when we first started planning it, I was just going to edit it myself. And it became apparent once it started growing into a feature, it was obvious that it was kind of beyond my level as an editor. I was much more suited to the kind of editing you need where you just have like one interviewee and you're cutting in some
Talking
clips.
head, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like a different level. I was like, okay, I need editors that are more used to doing actual documentaries. But I was also very picky about who those editors would be, because I was like, we knew all kinds of editors. There's all kinds of people who like would have taken the job, but I wanted someone who I felt like really felt the material and really could understand. Like, I was really interested in like psychedelic visuals and stuff like that, and I wanted it to feel a little bit like transcendental and stuff. And so I was like, I wanted editors who could go there with me and get it, And so I interviewed a lot of people like before I selected my editors, and it was a really interesting collaboration, because when I first did my rough cut, it's weird because I don't think the structure of the film changed dramatically from when I did my first rough cut. Like, I mean, all the interview bits that I had selected and the order that I had them in is pretty much intact from how I had it in my first rough cut. Other than I would say the international section, a lot of stuff ended up getting moved around, because when we first started the international section, I just had it going like country by country. And we realized that didn't work. So that section actually did get mixed around a lot. But a lot of the other sections were very close to what I had in my rough cut. But when I would watch my rough cut, it did not feel cinematic at all. Like, it was like, I was like, okay, all the information is here. It's like this nonstop information. One argument flows into the next. I'm covering everything I want to cover, but it doesn't feel exciting or dramatic or poignant, or like, it's not giving me anything emotionally, And so when I got my editors, Winnie Chung and Ben Shern, I just remember the first time that Ben handed, he was like, okay, I'm going to take my pass at the intro or whatever. And it was like night and day. It's like night and day, transformed completely, and it's like it was like the radio edit or like the audio, like the people speaking or whatever was just how I had it. But it was just like totally transformed. And I was like, oh, this feels like a movie. It feels really powerful. And it was like, it's kind of amazing how when you have editors who like really know what they're doing, it's like, you don't even know what they're doing. That makes it so good. It just works, And so, yeah. And so Winnie Chung, same thing. I mean, she was an incredible editor, and she had really great insights, and she pushed back with me a lot too, which was really great, because if she didn't understand things or didn't understand why I made certain decisions, she would be like, this is not clear to me. Like, this might be clear in your head to you, but it's not clear to me, which means it's not going to be clear to the audience watching it either, So she would like push me a lot of times to sort of clarify things. And then I would end up going back and doing more research for like 2 weeks, to answer these questions or kind of fill in these holes where things weren't quite gelling. I would then go off and read books for like 2 weeks, and the editor would be just waiting, like, I want to work, but I'd be like, I'm reading books so that I can formulate my ideas. And so I'm sure that was a very unusual way for people to work, because it dragged the project out a lot.
Sure. Yeah.
And that happened many times throughout, where I just had to, I was like, well, I'm not going to make it up. I'm not going to like cut stuff out just because I can't figure out how to make it make sense. I need to figure out how to make it make sense, because this is important to me. So I don't want to cut it just because I don't know how to make it fit, like I have to be more articulate,
Yeah.
And so then sometimes that would involve tracking down new speakers, new scholars, like people I knew who could address that specific thing that I needed somebody to talk about. And so a lot of the interviews were done in these kind of stages like that, where I had a group of people, and every stage I would think those were all the interviews I was going to need, and I would start editing it, and then holes would become apparent where I needed people to say this or that. And so then I would do like a new round of interviews. And this happened several times, before we got to the end. And then COVID also affected things, because at a certain point we couldn't interview people anymore. And I didn't want to do Zoom because it just didn't, I did one interview by Zoom. It just doesn't look good compared to the rest.
Yeah.
So I didn't continue doing them like that. And so it's kind of funny, because as the film goes on, I think there's more and more audio, like where you hear the voices, but you don't see them.
Right.
And a lot of that was because I was literally in my room recording. Like I couldn't film anyone, and I had to fill in a bunch of blanks. So I never planned on being in the movie myself. I'm in the movie.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, oh, this is so cheesy that I'm in my own movie. But it was kind of like the only way I could kind of have those transitions when we couldn't film anybody, So like I either had a friend film me, or else I would just be with my audio recorder. I would just like say the stuff I wanted to say, but then we would just have it with visuals. And there was no camera filming me. And as the film goes on and on, it kind of gets more like that, because we edited the film sequentially. So by the time you get to the international section, it's much more kind of just all visual and psychedelic, and you don't see the people as much.
Right.
But yeah, it was a really interesting thing to put together structurally, a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, your film, it kind of balances, it's a balancing act in the sense it's perfectly suited for streaming, because like, I mean, like, if you're streaming and you want to pause and write down what you want to, but also, I mean, we're fortunate. I mean, we're excited to show it on the big screen as well. So I mean, it's like definitely like, yeah. I mean, it's almost trance-like or seductive in a way that the way the film is put together, that it goes through different routes and whatnot, and it's almost like dreamlike, but still very scholarly, which I really like. Quickly, like it's like, I know, like I said, it just scratches the surface. You look at the kind of trajectory of the film. I mean, basically using the unholy trinity in a way like of kind of this folk horror rooted in kind of paganism, erasure of indigenous culture, paganism to Puritanism, moving to North America and whatnot, and then branching off to other parts of the world. I mean, America is such a huge place with many multicultural and whatnot. And I mean, Hawaii is a colonized space. There's like multicultural. There's like, I mean, me growing up, there's like multitude of different types of like campfire stories and whatnot are rooted in different cultures and whatnot. And also in our festival, the festival is rooted in the Asia Pacific Rim. And you look at kind of like folk horror coming from Asia. You look at Na Hong Jin's The Wailing from Korea, or Joko Anwar's Pedagore, which played at Sundance a few years ago. What, I mean, through your kind of like, I know, I mean, the founding of Miskatonic Institute and just your own work, what is your journey when it comes to kind of like seeking more research and material regarding, kind of folk horror, but also horror in general?
Well, I mean, a lot of times, like, it's funny because making this film, people think like, oh, now I'm the folk horror expert now or whatever. And it's like, actually, I don't consider myself that, because I actually looked to the people, like
Yeah.
I found the people I thought were the folk horror experts.
Right,
So
right.
I knew enough to ask the right questions, and I knew enough to know who I needed to get to talk in my film. But I
Mhm.
feel like they are actually the experts,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
more than me, because most of the people in the film have written books or at least long form essays and stuff about the things that I asked them to speak about.
Right.
You know, so I didn't ask the people to just speak about things randomly. Usually they have substantial writing on the stuff that I'm
Mhm.
asking them about.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of times, I mean, for Miskatonic and for also doing extras for Severin and like all kinds of programming, like, I mean, all kinds of stuff. I have this, I'm always looking for the experts, and I'm always looking for ways to acknowledge the experts, like to let them speak in their own words, you know, like rather than me kind of learning from them and then me kind of regurgitating their ideas. It's like finding a way to actually include them so they're talking and the words are coming from their mouth and people can associate those ideas with them, you know, that it's like, that was really important to me. And it was important with Miskatonic that, you know, I wanted, if people are going to come and like learn, and I'm going to put something forward that people are paying money to see or access, you know, because they want to learn something from someone. It was really important to me that I had done the proper research to find the right people who had put in the work where they have the right to be teaching people, you know, like, and that's a bit weird because I know certain types of pedagogy that's considered very old fashioned, you know,
Mhm.
to look at like the expert that's like just
Right.
speaking to the audience. Like a lot of modern pedagogy is much more about like discussion
Right.
and less hierarchy and stuff like that. And, you know, I see the value in that, but I personally like the experts. And I feel as though when someone spends their entire career trying to be an expert in something, to act like that doesn't count for something
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't work.
Sure.
You know, like it does count for something, you know. So
Mhm.
so I always look for those people, whether, you know, if we're releasing like an Italian cannibal movie or do it, you know, or whatever things we're doing, it's like there's somebody out there who has spent years of their life researching that thing and they are waiting for this opportunity to like share it with people, you know. And so I always try to kind of look for the people who know the most and have put in the most research into these things and then try to learn from them, but then also share them directly with other people, whether it's like students at Miskatonic or, you know, readers of an article I'm writing or whatever. It's like as much as you can preserve those people's actual voices and connect to them with the audiences and stuff like that, that's really important to me. Because yeah, I would know, you know, like anyone, I would know nothing if it wasn't for other people and their research and stuff, because we're all part of like a chain
Yeah.
of knowledge, you
Right.
know, and nobody just like is born knowing everything about something. There's always people in their lives that they are learning from, you know,
Mhm.
and you know, so it's just a chain of like sharing knowledge. And so I feel like I still, like, I've been doing this for 25 years and I'm constantly learning new things, constantly learning about movies I've never heard of that, you know, that I should know about, authors and books that I haven't read that, you know, I should have known about. I mean, it's actually exciting when every time you realize that there's this whole other area that you actually know nothing about. And there's so much more, you know, like there's so many more movies that are out there for you to get excited about, and books you can read, and I don't know, just all kinds of stuff. And so I felt like the folk horror thing, as you say, it kind of scratches the surface because there are countries, huge parts of the world we don't get into at all.
Yeah.
You know, like we don't even talk about France, you know, so it's like not even all the like standard European countries
Right.
get covered,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So there's tons of potential there, you know, where like this film touches upon certain things. It kind of opens up certain ideas or questions, but there's actually a lot more work out there for other people to do, you know, to get a fuller picture.
I mean, do you see this as like a chapter one or anything like that? Like, do you see yourself continuing onwards as making other films based on this, or just going to a different direction in general as a filmmaker? Because you wear many hats, but this is your first time as a filmmaker and
Yeah.
whatnot. Do you just are you interested in continuing onwards as a filmmaker?
I mean, I would definitely be interested in making another film to see if I could figure out how to do it better, because I think I feel like I did everything kind of like the long way, like where I was like, well, maybe now that I know more, like, because even my editors would talk to me and they'd be using terminology that I didn't even know what it meant, because they had more experience than I did.
Right.
So I feel as though, like, if I did it again, I could maybe do it in half the time, because I would know better, like, what kind of things to do. So I'd be interested in doing another one for that purpose. But in terms of like the folk horror topic itself, I do think there's absolutely like a series that somebody could do, like Shudder could do a folk horror series, and I would be, I'd proudly be the executive director of something, or like executive producer or something like that. But
whatever, yeah.
But I think I would move on and do other things, and I would kind of like let new people take over to do that.
Yeah.
So,
like, I mean, if you were able to do another documentary, what other subject or genre would you explore?
Well, this is funny because people have asked me this and they never understand my answer, but I always say the history of bubblegum music.
Oh.
Like the Ohio Express and like all the oh my God, what is it? Like 1910 Fruit Gum Company and the Partridge Family and like all this stuff. Like, I mean, I am a Saturday morning kid from the early 70s, and this stuff is baked into my DNA, and it's I did years ago, there's a book called Bubblegum Music is the Naked Truth. And when I was a programmer at the Alamo Draft House, I contacted the editors of the book to ask them if I could make kind of like a video compilation thing to go with their book that would have the name of their book and utilize writing from the book. And they gave me permission, and it was an anthology book. So there was all different writers who participated in it, but I made this like 2-hour long thing using all my own kind of bootleg videos and stuff that I had of all these TV appearances and commercials and all kinds of stuff. And so I patched together kind of a script based on everything in the book, and then narrated it myself, and then had all this footage from all these, TV shows and stuff like that. And it was the very first thing I ever edited in my life, but I still look back at it and I feel like it was pretty good. Like it had potential. Like if there was actual resources behind this, like I felt like this could be a really good documentary. And so I still have had that kind of in my back pocket as something that I would like to do someday. But music stuff is much harder. Music stuff, you don't have fair use with music the way you do with movie clips. It's a much more expensive prospect.
For sure. Well, I mean, think if anything, Woodlands Dark, it's like, and Days Bewitched is kind of like a great kind of document of what you can do. So I think as I admire your work and your and then I think it's and we're again honored to have it as part of the film festival. Honored to have you as part of the NAP section, and I implore everyone to see it on the big screen at the Hawaii National Film Festival. Thank you, Kayla, for joining us in this Q&A, and just concludes our Q&A. And thank you again for and a special mahalo to all of our HIF sponsors, board of directors, and our HIF Ohana members. If you're able, please consider donating to HIF. Every dollar counts toward keeping HIF presenting great content like this in the future. Learn more and donate at hif.org/donate. Again, Kayla, thank you so much. I wish you well, and hopefully we'll see you in Hawaii in a few weeks. So, and please, thank you again, and then enjoy the festival. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.